You are surrounded by signals. Every room you walk into is filled with messages that are never spoken. Every conversation contains more truth in silence than in sound. Every human you meet is telling you exactly who they are, without realizing it. The problem is not that people are mysterious. The problem is that most people never learn how to observe. They listen to words. They miss behavior. They trust promises. They ignore patterns. And because of that, they get hurt. They get manipulated. They get confused. They misjudge people again and again and again. This audiobook exists to change that. Welcome to How to Understand Human Behavior, the psychology of human behavior. This is not about tricks. This is not about manipulation. This is not about becoming cold or calculating. This is about clarity. Because once you understand human behavior, you stop taking things personally. You stop being surprised by betrayal. You stop confusing charm with character. You stop handing power to people who have not earned your trust. And most importantly, you stop being blind. Let me ask you something. How many times have you trusted someone who later disappointed you? How many times did you ignore a gut feeling because the words sounded right? How many times did you feel something was off, but couldn't explain why? That feeling was intelligence trying to speak to you. Human beings communicate in two languages. One is obvious, the other is invisible. Most people obsess over words, but words are cheap. Words can be rehearsed. Words can be manipulated. Words can lie. Behavior doesn't lie. Tone doesn't lie. Timing doesn't lie. Patterns don't lie. People reveal themselves constantly, not through what they say, but through how they act when they don't think they're being evaluated. And the moment you learn to see that, your social life changes. Your relationships change. Your career changes. Your power changes. This audiobook will teach you how to read people without paranoia, without cynicism, and without losing empathy. Because understanding human behavior is not about judgment. It's about awareness. Let's start with a hard truth. Most of the pain in your life did not come from events. It came from people. And most of that pain came from misunderstanding them. You assumed they thought like you. You assumed they felt what you felt. You assumed their intentions matched their words. They didn't. Not because they were evil, but because people are driven by forces they don't fully understand themselves. Fear, insecurity, status, desire for control, desire for validation. Human behavior is emotional first, rational second, always. People justify their actions with logic after the emotional decision has already been made. Once you accept that, everything starts to make sense. You stop asking, why would they do that? And start asking, what emotional need is driving this behavior? That question alone will save you years of confusion. Now let's talk about something most people miss. Human behavior is consistent under pressure. When people are relaxed, they perform. When people are stressed, they reveal. Stress removes the mask. Watch how people behave when they don't get what they want. Watch how they react to criticism. Watch how they treat people who can do nothing for them. Watch how they behave when they think no one is watching. That's the real person. Not the smile, not the pitch, not the charm. Behavior over time is truth. This audiobook will teach you how to recognize genuine confidence versus fragile ego, empathy versus performance, integrity versus image, leadership versus control, interest versus convenience. You will learn why some people drain you the moment they enter the room, why some people make you feel calm without saying a word, why certain personalities dominate conversations, why others manipulate through silence, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. But here's the most important part. Understanding human behavior is not just about reading others. It's about understanding yourself. Because every reaction you have is also behavior. Every emotional trigger is information. Every pattern in your relationships is feedback. If you don't understand human behavior, you repeat cycles. If you do understand it, you break them. This audiobook is a mirror, not a weapon. As we move forward, you'll begin to notice things you once ignored. Small pauses, micro expressions, inconsistencies between words and actions, energy shifts in conversations. You'll become quieter, not because you have less to say, but because you're finally listening. And that's where real power begins. In the next chapter, we'll uncover why words are the weakest form of communication, and how your brain already knows the truth long before your logic catches up. Pay attention, because from this moment on, every interaction is information. Chapter 2. Why words are the weakest signal. Most people believe communication is about talking. It's not. Talking is the smallest part of communication and the most misleading. Words are the easiest thing to fake. Anyone can say the right thing. Anyone can rehearse sincerity. Anyone can memorize confidence, but behavior requires energy. Consistency requires effort, and effort reveals truth. If you want to understand human behavior, you must stop giving words the highest authority in the room, because words are cheap currency. Think about this. How many times have you heard, "I'll change"? I didn't mean it. "I care about you. I'll do better next time." And yet, nothing changed. That's because words don't predict behavior. Patterns do. The human brain evolved to read behavior long before language existed. Tone, posture, facial tension, distance, timing. Your instincts are not irrational. They're ancient. That uncomfortable feeling you get around certain people, that's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition trying to warn you before logic interferes. But most people override it. They say, maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I'm being judgmental. Maybe they're just having a bad day. Sometimes that's true, but often it's self-betrayal. Here's a critical distinction. There is a difference between giving people grace and ignoring reality. Grace is temporary. Patterns are permanent. Anyone can have a bad moment. No one accidentally behaves the same way for years. If someone repeatedly disrespects boundaries, that's not misunderstanding. That's character. If someone repeatedly disappears when things get hard, that's not coincidence. That's avoidance. If someone repeatedly makes promises without follow-through, that's not optimism. That's manipulation or self-deception. Behavior always tells the truth eventually. Words only tell the truth when aligned with action. And this is where most people lose power. They listen with their ears instead of their awareness. They hear tone, not timing. They hear language, not leverage. They hear reassurance, not reality. Let's talk about timing. One of the most revealing signals in human behavior. Timing is honesty without words. When someone cares, they find time. When someone values you, they prioritize you. When something matters, it shows up on the calendar. Excuses are explanations, not evidence. Pay attention to who responds quickly when you need them, and who vanishes. Pay attention to who remembers what matters to you, and who only remembers when it benefits them. Human behavior always follows incentives. People invest where they see value. They withdraw where they don't. And this isn't cruel. It's natural. The mistake is assuming people value the same things you do. They don't. That's not pessimism. That's awareness. Another powerful signal. Energy consistency. Watch how people treat you when they're tired, stressed, or inconvenienced. That's the real baseline. Anyone can be kind when things are easy. Anyone can be generous when they're winning. But when someone is under pressure, their values leak out. Some people become controlling. Some become cold. Some become dismissive. Some become aggressive. Some disappear. Those reactions are not accidents. They're rehearsed internally over years. Stress doesn't create character. It reveals it. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable. People don't always behave badly because they are malicious. Often, they behave badly because they are unaware. Most humans are running on autopilot. They repeat patterns they learned early. They copy behavior they witnessed. They react instead of choose. And they rarely stop to ask, why do I do this? Understanding human behavior requires one thing above all else: detachment without cruelty. You must learn to observe without absorbing. When you personalize behavior, you lose clarity. When you observe behavior, you gain power. Someone being distant isn't always about you. Someone being rude isn't always intentional. Someone being inconsistent isn't always trying to hurt you, but, and this matters, it is always information. Information about what they can offer. Information about their emotional capacity. Information about how safe they are to rely on. Your job is not to change people. Your job is to see them clearly. Let me say that again. Your job is not to fix human behavior. Your job is to respond intelligently to it. This is where emotional intelligence begins. Not empathy that excuses everything, not judgment that condemns everything, but awareness that allows choice. When you understand behavior, you stop chasing explanations. You stop needing closure. You stop trying to decode contradictions. You simply adjust access. Not everyone deserves the same proximity. Not everyone earns the same trust. Not everyone belongs in your inner circle. And that's not arrogance. That's discernment. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper into patterns and why your brain recognizes danger before your mind can explain it. You'll learn why gut feelings are data and how to trust them without becoming cynical. Stay focused, because from here forward, we're not just learning about people, we're learning how to protect your energy. Chapter 3. Patterns never lie. If you want to understand human behavior, stop asking why, and start asking how often. Why invites stories. How often reveals patterns. People lie to protect their image. Patterns don't care about appearances. A single action means nothing. Repeated behavior is a confession. This is one of the hardest truths for emotionally intelligent people to accept, because awareness makes you compassionate, and compassion can blur judgment. But clarity requires courage. Here's the rule most people avoid. Whatever someone repeatedly does, they are choosing, even if they don't understand why, even if they explain it away, even if they feel bad afterward. Repetition is preference. If someone repeatedly crosses your boundaries, they are choosing their comfort over your limits. If someone repeatedly cancels, delays, or forgets, they are choosing their priorities over your time. If someone repeatedly apologizes without changing, they are choosing relief over responsibility. This doesn't mean they're evil. It means they're honest, through behavior. And honesty is always more useful than intention. Now let's talk about the myth that destroys clarity: potential. Most people don't fall in love with behavior. They fall in love with who someone could be. They say, if they healed, if they tried harder, if they understood me. But potential is not a promise. Human behavior is driven by incentives, habits, and emotional capacity, not by wishes. You cannot build a relationship, a partnership, or a future on maybe. The brain resists this truth because it threatens attachment. When you detach from potential and focus on patterns, you gain something rare: freedom. Because patterns tell you how much effort to invest, how close to stand, how much to expect, when to walk away. This is not cynicism. This is realism with compassion. Another critical concept: people don't repeat what hurts them, they repeat what works. If someone uses guilt and it gets them compliance, they'll keep using guilt. If someone avoids conflict and it gets them peace, they'll keep avoiding. If someone manipulates and it gets them control, they'll refine manipulation. Behavior is reinforced by outcomes. That's why reacting emotionally often strengthens the very behavior you dislike. Anger feeds attention. Over-explaining feeds control. Chasing feeds distance. Understanding behavior means understanding reinforcement. What you tolerate teaches people how to treat you. What you reward teaches people what to repeat. Silence can be a boundary. Distance can be feedback. Consistency can be a filter. Now let's address intuition, because it's misunderstood. Your intuition is not magic. It's your brain recognizing patterns faster than your conscious mind. Tiny inconsistencies, micro-expressions, energy shifts, behavioral mismatches. Your intuition connects these dots quietly, and when you ignore it, your nervous system remembers. That's why some people drain you without saying anything wrong. That's why some conversations feel off even when the words are polite. Your body notices before your logic catches up. The goal is not to distrust people. The goal is to trust yourself. Trust that discomfort is information, not drama. Trust that confusion is a signal, not weakness. Trust that clarity often feels calm, not intense. People who are safe don't keep you guessing. They are predictable in the best way. Predictable respect, predictable effort, predictable honesty. Chaos feels exciting at first. Stability feels boring until you realize it's peace. Here's the final insight of this chapter. You don't need more explanations from people. You need fewer excuses for them. Understanding human behavior means accepting what is, not negotiating with what isn't. In the next chapter, we'll explore emotional triggers and how people unconsciously use them to control, bond, or dominate. Because once you understand triggers, you stop being reactive, and reaction is where power is lost. Chapter 4. Emotional Triggers. The invisible strings. Every human being has emotional triggers, not because they are weak, but because they are human. Triggers are not flaws. They are emotional pressure points formed by past experiences, unmet needs, and unresolved wounds. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Whoever understands your triggers can influence your behavior, even without realizing it. That's why understanding human behavior begins with understanding emotional buttons. A trigger is simply this: an emotional shortcut. Something bypasses logic and goes straight to reaction. A tone of voice, a look of disapproval, a word that hits an old memory, silence where reassurance was expected. Suddenly, you're no longer responding to this moment. You're responding to every moment that came before it. That's how power shifts. Most manipulation doesn't look like manipulation. It looks like, "I was just joking. You're too sensitive. I didn't mean it like that. Why are you making a big deal out of this?" These phrases don't attack logic. They attack emotional stability. They create self-doubt. And self-doubt is fertile ground for control. But here's the key distinction most people miss. Not everyone who triggers you is manipulating you, but everyone who manipulates you relies on triggers. Some people trigger you accidentally. Others learn your triggers and return to them intentionally. The difference is pattern and accountability. Healthy people adjust when they hurt you. Manipulative people repeat what works. Now let's talk about the most common triggers that shape human behavior. Trigger number 1. Fear of abandonment. This trigger makes people overgive, over-explain, overstay. They tolerate disrespect because leaving feels worse than suffering. They confuse intensity with connection. They chase clarity from people who benefit from keeping things vague. When abandonment fear runs the system, logic becomes negotiable. Trigger number 2. Need for approval. This trigger makes people betray their values for acceptance. They say yes when they mean no. They laugh when they feel uncomfortable. They perform instead of express. Approval feels like safety, until it costs identity. Trigger number 3. Fear of conflict. This trigger creates silence where truth should be. People with this trigger suppress needs, delay boundaries, and avoid honesty. They don't fear conflict itself. They fear emotional fallout. So they trade short-term peace for long-term resentment. Trigger number 4. Shame. Shame is the most powerful emotional lever. When someone can make you feel wrong, defective, or not enough, they gain influence over your self-perception. Shame keeps people small, quiet, and compliant. That's why healthy communication addresses behavior, not character. Now here's where mastery begins. Triggers lose power when they are named. The moment you can say, "This reaction is familiar. I've felt this before. This is old." You interrupt the loop. You create space between stimulus and response. And space is where freedom lives. Emotionally intelligent people don't suppress feelings. They observe them. They ask, what am I actually reacting to? Is this about now or then? What belief just got activated? That pause is everything, because people can only control you through emotions you haven't made conscious. Awareness dissolves leverage. And here's a powerful reframe. Your triggers reveal what needs healing, not what needs hiding. They show you where boundaries are weak, where self-worth is outsourced, where old stories are still running the present. You don't need to eliminate triggers to grow. You need to stop letting them drive the wheel. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper into defense mechanisms. The psychological armor people use to protect their ego, avoid responsibility, and preserve identity. Because once you understand defense mechanisms, you stop taking things personally. And when nothing is personal, everything becomes clear. Chapter 5. Defense Mechanisms. How the mind protects the ego. Every human being defends something, not always from danger, but from discomfort. Defense mechanisms are not signs of immaturity. They are psychological shields built to protect identity, self-image, and emotional safety. And once you understand them, you stop asking, why are they like this? And start seeing what they're protecting. Because behavior is rarely about truth. It's about survival of the ego. The ego's primary job is simple. Protect the story you believe about yourself. Even if that story is false, even if it causes pain, even if it limits growth. The ego prefers familiar suffering over unfamiliar growth. That's why people defend habits that hurt them, why they resist feedback, why they reject information that threatens identity. Defense mechanisms activate when the ego feels exposed, and they activate fast. Here are the most common ones, and what they really mean. Denial. Denial says, this isn't happening. It protects against overwhelming truth. People deny addictions, failing relationships, emotional neglect, or personal responsibility, not because they're stupid, but because acknowledging reality would collapse their internal structure. Denial buys time, but it charges interest. Rationalization. Rationalization says, here's a logical reason for my emotional choice. It turns feelings into explanations. I'm not avoiding them. I'm just busy. I didn't fail. It wasn't meant for me. I'm not angry. I'm just honest. Rationalization doesn't solve the issue. It just makes the ego comfortable enough to stay the same. Projection. Projection says, I don't have this problem. You do. People project traits they can't accept in themselves. Insecurity becomes criticism. Dishonesty becomes suspicion. Anger becomes, everyone else is aggressive. Projection allows the ego to stay clean by exporting blame. Deflection. Deflection changes the subject. When accountability appears, humor shows up. When truth gets close, distractions multiply. When vulnerability is required, jokes take over. Deflection keeps depth at a distance. Intellectualization. This defense turns emotions into concepts. People analyze instead of feel, explain instead of experience, theorize instead of connect. It looks intelligent, but it avoids vulnerability. Now here's the most important truth about defense mechanisms. They are unconscious. People are not choosing them. They are reacting through them. That's why arguing with defense rarely works. Logic doesn't dissolve ego protection. Safety does. Emotionally intelligent people don't attack defenses. They notice them. They listen for patterns, repeated excuses, shifting blame, avoided topics, emotional shutdown. And instead of pushing harder, they adjust strategy. Because resistance reveals where pressure is felt. Now here's where your power increases. When you recognize defense mechanisms in others, you stop internalizing their reactions. Someone snapping at you may be protecting shame. Someone dismissing feedback may be protecting identity. Someone avoiding commitment may be protecting fear. It doesn't excuse behavior, but it explains it. And explanation brings clarity. But here's the deeper layer. You use defense mechanisms too. Everyone does. The question isn't if you defend, it's what you defend. Growth begins when you can say, I'm protecting something right now. I feel threatened. I'm uncomfortable. That honesty disarms the ego. And here's the paradox. The strongest minds don't defend, they adapt. They allow truth without collapse. They allow feedback without identity loss. They allow discomfort without panic, because their self-worth is not fragile. In the next chapter, we'll explore why people repeat patterns, even painful ones, and how the brain chooses familiarity over happiness. Once you understand that, you'll stop asking why people don't change and start seeing what they're loyal to. Chapter 6. Why people repeat the same patterns, even when they hurt. People don't repeat patterns because they're weak. They repeat patterns because the brain values familiarity over happiness. This is one of the most misunderstood truths about human behavior. The mind is not designed to make you happy. It is designed to keep you alive and predict what comes next. Predictability equals safety, even when the pattern is painful, even when it leads to loss, even when it sabotages progress. If it's familiar, the brain trusts it. That's why people return to toxic relationships, why they repeat financial mistakes, why they stay in environments that drain them, why they choose partners who feel right, but hurt them in the same way every time. The brain recognizes patterns faster than it evaluates outcomes, and once a pattern is recognized, it becomes automatic. This is called pattern looping. A trigger appears, an emotion activates, a behavior follows, a result reinforces the loop. Over time, the loop becomes identity. I'm just bad at relationships. I always mess things up. This is how my life goes. And the brain accepts that as truth. But here's the deeper layer. Patterns are not repeated randomly. They are repeated because they resolve unfinished emotional business. The mind tries to complete what was once incomplete. If someone grew up needing approval, they may chase unavailable people. If someone grew up in chaos, calm may feel boring or unsafe. If someone learned love equals effort, peace may feel undeserved. The brain is not trying to punish you. It's trying to normalize you. Now here's where awareness becomes power. Once a pattern is conscious, it loses control. When you can say, "This feels familiar, not healthy. This reaction belongs to an old version of me. This emotion is loud, but it's not a command," you interrupt the loop. And interruption is everything, because the brain cannot distinguish between repetition and truth. But it can learn new patterns when you pause. That pause is called response flexibility. Emotionally intelligent people do not eliminate emotions. They delay reaction. They create a space between feeling and action. And in that space, choice appears. This is why discipline matters more than motivation. Motivation reacts to emotion. Discipline acts despite it. Now here's the truth most people avoid. Breaking a pattern feels wrong before it feels right, because unfamiliar behavior triggers uncertainty, and uncertainty triggers anxiety. The brain will protest. It will say, "This isn't you. This feels forced. This won't last." That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're doing something new. Growth feels uncomfortable because comfort belongs to the past. Now let's connect this to how you read people. When someone keeps repeating the same behavior, ask, what are they loyal to? What emotional role does this pattern serve? What fear would they face if they changed? People don't let go of patterns until the pain of staying becomes greater than the fear of leaving. And you cannot force that moment, but you can understand it. And understanding gives you emotional distance. In the next chapter, we'll explore power dynamics in everyday interactions. Who leads, who follows, and how influence silently shifts in every conversation. Once you see that, you'll never hear words the same way again. Chapter 7. Power, Status, and the Invisible Games. People play. Every interaction contains a power dynamic, even when no one mentions it, even when it's subtle, even when it's disguised as kindness, humor, or politeness. Human beings are constantly, often unconsciously, negotiating status. Not dominance in the dramatic sense, but position. Who leads the emotional tone? Who reacts first? Who seeks approval? Who controls silence? Power in human behavior is rarely loud. It's quiet, it's invisible, and it's felt more than spoken. Here's the truth most people miss. Power belongs to the person who needs less. The one who needs less validation, less reassurance, less control, less reaction. That doesn't make them cold, it makes them grounded. Now look at everyday situations. In conversations, who fills silence first? Who over-explains? Who rushes to justify themselves? Those behaviors don't mean weakness, but they signal psychological positioning. People read these signals instantly, not consciously, instinctively, because humans evolved to detect hierarchy for survival. Now here's where misunderstanding happens. Power is not about manipulation. It's about emotional self-regulation. The person who can stay calm when others react, the person who doesn't rush to defend their identity, the person who doesn't emotionally chase, they naturally influence the room. Not because they try to, because others adjust to them. This is why emotional intelligence amplifies influence. When you manage your emotions, others feel safer around you. And safety creates trust. Trust creates authority. Authority creates influence. Now let's talk about status behaviors. High status behavior is responsive, not reactive. Low status behavior is impulsive. High status behavior listens more than it speaks. Low status behavior tries to be heard immediately. High status behavior asks thoughtful questions. Low status behavior seeks quick approval. But here's the key. None of this is fixed. Status shifts moment by moment. You can raise or lower your influence in seconds, not by what you say, but how you respond. Watch how people test boundaries. A subtle interruption, a dismissive joke, a challenge disguised as humor. These are not attacks, they're probes. People are unconsciously asking, where do you stand? How emotionally stable are you? Will you react or respond? And your reaction answers them. If you get defensive, the dynamic tilts. If you stay calm, grounded, and clear, the dynamic resets. This doesn't mean suppressing emotion, it means choosing timing. Emotionally intelligent people feel deeply, but they act deliberately. Now let's look at why some people dominate conversations. It's rarely confidence, it's often insecurity masked as control. Talking too much is a way to avoid silence, because silence invites self-awareness. Listening requires strength, because listening means you're not hiding. Now here's the critical insight. People with true influence don't try to win interactions. They aim to understand dynamics. They observe patterns. Who seeks attention? Who avoids accountability? Who mirrors emotions? Who resists vulnerability? Once you see these patterns, people become predictable. Not in a judgmental way, in a clarifying way. You stop taking things personally. Someone's aggression, likely insecurity. Someone's avoidance, likely fear. Someone's control, likely lack of inner stability. Understanding this gives you emotional freedom, because you realize most behavior isn't about you. It's about unregulated emotion. Now here's where mastery begins. When you stop reacting to behavior and start responding to motivation. Instead of asking, what did they say? You ask, what are they protecting? What are they afraid of? What do they need right now? That shift changes everything. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper into why people lie to themselves and how self-deception shapes relationships, decisions, and destiny. Because the most dangerous behavior is the behavior people justify to themselves. Chapter 8. Self-deception, why people lie to themselves before they lie to you. The most powerful lies are never spoken out loud. They live quietly inside the mind. Because before a person deceives the world, they almost always deceive themselves. Human beings do not see reality as it is. They see reality as it protects them. And this is not weakness, it's wiring. The mind's primary job is not truth, it is survival, so it filters. It reframes, it edits, it creates stories that allow a person to feel consistent, justified, and safe. That's self-deception, and it drives more human behavior than logic ever will. Think about it. How many people say they want growth, but avoid discomfort? How many say they want honesty, but reject feedback? How many say they want change, but cling to identity? The gap between intention and action is rarely laziness. It's self-deception, because accepting the truth would require letting go of a familiar story, and familiar pain feels safer than unknown potential. This is why people stay in unhealthy relationships, why they stay in jobs they hate, why they repeat patterns they swear they want to escape. They're not stupid. They're protecting an identity. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't want truth. They want emotional safety. Truth threatens identity. If I admit this relationship is wrong, what does that say about my choices? If I admit I'm avoiding growth, what does that say about my discipline? If I admit I'm afraid, what does that say about my strength? So the mind creates stories. I'm just waiting for the right time. It's not that bad. I'm different. They don't understand me. I'll change later. These stories aren't lies meant to manipulate others. They're lies meant to soothe the self. And the longer they're repeated, the more convincing they become. This is why logic alone rarely changes people. You can present facts, evidence, proof, but if the truth threatens identity, it will be rejected. That's not arrogance. That's survival psychology. Now here's where emotional intelligence separates leaders from followers. Emotionally intelligent people learn to question their own narratives. They don't just ask, "Is this true?" They ask, "Why do I need this to be true?" That question is powerful because it exposes motive. And once motive is exposed, growth becomes possible. Now let's talk about how self-deception affects relationships. People don't fall in love with others. They fall in love with projections. They see potential. They see who someone could be. And then they ignore evidence that contradicts that vision. Why? Because letting go would mean admitting misjudgment, and the ego resists that. So people rationalize. They'll change. It's just stress. I can handle it. Until resentment replaces hope. This pattern exists everywhere. Friendships, families, work environments. People tolerate misalignment because confronting truth feels like failure. But truth isn't failure. Avoiding truth is. Now here's the breakthrough. The most dangerous self-deception is not believing false things. It's avoiding uncomfortable questions. Questions like, what am I afraid to admit? What pattern keeps repeating? What am I gaining by staying the same? What truth would change my identity? These questions create silence. And silence is where clarity lives. Most people avoid silence. They fill it with noise, with distraction, with justification. But emotionally intelligent people lean into silence. They let discomfort surface, because discomfort is information. Now here's the paradox. The moment you stop protecting your ego, you gain power. Because you're no longer fighting reality. You're cooperating with it, and that's where growth accelerates. In the next chapter, we'll explore how awareness rewires behavior, and why simply noticing patterns can begin changing them. Because awareness isn't passive. It's the first act of transformation.